feared and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hit you with a win. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jiggle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Chasing the Pennant podcast. Tonight, I am your host, Rob. I am joined by Andrew. Andrew, how's it going?
It's going really well. I was watching a lot of the Phillies inter-squad game today and watching the championship of the tournament from the basketball league. And I don't know if you guys watch them. Probably watching the Union tonight as they start their second game from their comeback. So sports are slowly coming back. So it's starting to get back to regular life for me. And, of course, I'm wearing my JT jersey today while watching the game. So hopefully they can re-sign him soon.
Sign that, man.
Amen.
Sign
Amen.
that, I am also joined, the voice that you just heard there was Biscuit. Biscuit, how's it going?
How's it going, Rob? Thanks for having me. Like Andrew, I was watching a little bit of the intra-squad game earlier. Just happy to see baseball on my TV. We are inching closer and closer to the July 24th opening day 2.0, and I'm getting a little excited. It's starting to really kick in. Watching today made me realize, it's right around the corner. I was happy I got to see Zach Wheeler pitch for about 4 innings, given, how early spring training games are and the fact that I'm working most of the day. I never really got to see him actually pitch live before the shutdown. So it was really refreshing to see him on the TV today.
Yeah, it's just refreshing to see sports in general on the TV. It's been so long, something that's been long overdue, and returning to some semblance of normalcy here. We get the sports on TV and regular season baseball right around the corner. And lastly, but certainly not least, I am joined by a man who is very busy writing great hockey articles, so definitely check them out. But we're talking baseball here tonight, and that is Borek. Borek, how's it going?
Doing well. I've been watching the game as well. I started it late because I was doing what you were actually just saying, writing a different article. It started and forgot it started at 6 and not 7. So good thing YouTube lets you rewind. Beauty of YouTube. So I rewinded, went back to the beginning, and started from there. So works out beautifully. The game was good. Does anybody else have a weird color though on their camera when they have the angle behind the pitcher? It looks like a lot greener than usual. I don't know if that's just me or
I did not pick up on that.
Okay, gotcha. I didn't know if that was just me or not.
I feel like I know what you were talking about, Bork, but I think it was just because of they didn't have the lights on at the stadium just yet. So kind of like how the sun was reflecting in the dark, like it was still very dark behind the mound or around the mound. I think it was just kind of like how the park was lit around the time the game started, but it got better as it got a little darker and they flipped the lights on.
Gotcha, that makes sense. No, I was just curious because that looked really weird on TV. That's what I was wondering.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of sporting events taking place in the city of Philadelphia, Philadelphia announced today that there will be a 6-month-long, ban, if you will, on large gatherings taking place in public areas. Now, the stadiums technically are private venues. So technically this does not apply to them, but there have already been talks that the Eagles will not have any fans this season. It's already very likely that the Phillies will not have any fans, and it remains to be seen what the upcoming seasons, not the current seasons that they're finishing, but the upcoming seasons will have in store for the Flyers and the 76ers at the Wells Fargo Center. Guys, given what happened today and what was decided on in Philadelphia, and Biscuit, we'll start with you this time, does this change how you feel about the potential that this or the chances of this 60-game baseball season actually surviving throughout the duration?
I mean, I don't know if it's going to have a direct relation onto it, but it certainly doesn't make me feel more optimistic about a full season being played out. I mean, look, you got cases are back on the rise. You have players, staff still continuing to test positive on multiple baseball teams. It really sounds like players are having some issue. Not like they're not having issues vocalizing it, but there are some issues with the health and safety protocols, and players are coming out and saying, testing isn't that reliable. They're slow to get results. It just seems like a lot going on, and there's still so many moving pieces. And the fact that there's just kind of another piece of bad news really thrown into the chain. Like, I don't know if it's directly going to affect the chances that a full season is played out, but the other signs that put this thing in place, like cases being back on the rise, more and more people testing positive again instead of testing or cases going back down, like it just doesn't make you feel good. And I think even if a full season is still played out, you might see people continue to opt out. I feel like some guys are still up in the air on their status of whether they're going to play this season. There's people who don't sound confident. So the fact that there's just kind of another piece of bad news thrown into this whole chaotic mess, it's certainly not something you want to hear for sure, Rob.
Yeah, and you mentioned the players opting out, and you have guys who seem like they're on the fringe. Zach Wheeler he's expecting a kid soon, and he mentioned before that he's not completely sold on the idea of playing baseball this summer. Mike Trout, he's kind of made some comments that he's not entirely sold on it. Bryce Harper hasn't said anything, but he's expecting another kid. And so, yeah, you have a lot of big name baseball players who have either come out and made comments that they're not crazy about playing this year, or you have guys who are ready to become filers. So that's gonna have a huge impact on it for sure. Andrew, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, when I first saw this come out, I was shocked because, I mean, don't get me wrong. Obviously, with the rise in cases we've seen in different states and different cities, it's better to take caution. But I was just shocked to see it go through February already. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's obviously better to do something, but I was expecting something in the near future, just be another, come out and you kind of cancel something for the next few months or something leading into the fall season and all that. But when I saw this come out into February, I couldn't believe it at first because I was like, that just seems like, and you guys know how much I've been on here saying it is really good to take caution. But I thought this was a little far out to do it until February because it's just been such a couple weeks switch and transition. No one really knows what it's going to be from week to week. So again, February surprised me. But as you guys mentioned, the players itself, I think that's where this could honestly have the biggest impact more than for the season getting canceled in itself. I think the players might see this, and this is where the players who were on the fence, like you guys said, could back out. And I think that's my biggest worry more than the actual season being canceled from it. Because I think we all expected them to play without fans, and that was kind of anticipated. So I think that's kind of just reiterates that point. They did say they can still play the season, so I don't think it has too much effect on the actual commissioner coming out and canceling anything. But I think this does play a huge part for the players. I am interested to see if we see some players, not just baseball, all different sports, kind of come out and back away from it, from playing, just because this is pretty alarming to see. And it makes me interested at least to find out what did the Philadelphia, I don't know who they talked to, or which health officials they talked to, but who did they talk to kind of get this information to go 6 months deep, and kind of what do they know that we don't know in the sense of that long? Because I think we were kind of all expecting to somewhat get back to something somewhat of normal around the start of football or a little after football season. So that kind of, it's more alarming than anything to realize how deep this whole thing could go. And it's what do they know that hasn't really been released fully to the public for them to cancel to February?
I don't think it's anything, honestly, personally. I think it's just precaution, like you started with. I don't think they know a damn thing because this virus is so ever-changing. Most of the doctors that try to study it don't even know the whole thing. So how do we expect the city of Philly to know the whole thing? So I think it's more just a precaution thing where Philly's been pretty precautionary, other than with the protests, with all the stuff where they had a spike on July 10th. That was the first time it went over 1,000 for a bit, but then in the last 3 days, have only been hundreds at a time. So I also think that probably had a factor in taking caution and having it. I don't know why that would factor in going all the way to February, like Andrew said. I would think more like December at the most, like the end of the year. But I think, like I said before we got on the podcast, it's going to adjust in time if the numbers are just in time. I don't think you're going to keep it at 6 months if Philly is still doing very well 3 months from now. And there's really no reason to keep it another 3 months if we're sitting pretty 3 months from now. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think you're just going to keep it because you implemented it 3 months ago. You probably adjust it at that point. That's just how I feel. I don't know if I look at it more positively from a sense of I think they're just being overly cautious because we've been one of the better towns, especially in a surrounding area of Jersey and New York that have not been good. So I think it's been impressive how we've been able to keep our cases where we've kept them. So I think they're just trying to keep it that way. That's the way that I look at it.
I just think it's funny to look at the different ways different cities are kind of handling everything, and you see Philadelphia do this, and then Disney opened this past Saturday, and I don't think it
Florida,
was,
man.
Florida,
man.
you have all these leagues going down there to try to reopen, and
they're going to the damn park.
Yeah, and then they allow the players to go into the park now. So it's just funny the way it kind of turns out, and you see these cities do these different things, but yeah, it's just weird to look at. But I do think this will impact the way that the season goes about from the player side of it.
Yeah, can we just off topic a little bit, but with the NBA and their quote unquote bubble down in Orlando, can we just talk about that? There's a couple things going on there. First off, Rajon Rondo calling a 5-star Disney resort a Motel 6. Okay, so there's that. And then there's I believe it was Donovan Mitchell inviting an Instagram model into the bubble, which is, I'm surprised that's the only instance of that happening. I would not be shocked if there's been dozens of NBA players who had invited a handful of models each into that bubble so they can have their fun during that little quarantine down there. And then you have the former Sixer, Richaun Holmes, getting quarantined for 10 days because he didn't like the food that was available down there, and he decided to order delivery, but the delivery driver couldn't get within the bubble, so Richaun Holmes left the bubble to get his food, and because he left the bubble, he's quarantined for 10 days, and I think he's halfway through that. I think he's got 5 days left. So they should really make a fucking reality show of the NBA bubble down there in Orlando, because that would be must-watch TV.
Yeah, and this is only 3 days into the bubble too, and they're expecting to try to have this last somehow 3 months. It's funny to look at, and the whole Mitchell situation was kind of funny too, because I'm pretty sure the person he invited, she posted on her social media I just got invited by a player into the Disney bubble or whatever, and it's well that gave that away so fast.
It's going to be a mess down there. And don't forget, you still got J.R. Smith, who hasn't made a headline yet, but definitely will by the time this 3 months is up, and a few other guys who were quite the characters in the NBA.
LeBron might keep his ass in check.
LeBron's never been a controversial guy in that.
But I don't think the NBA, when JR was on that one call and he's like, oh, I got to go for some NBA. I can't remember what he said. He's like, oh, I got to get off for some NBA stuff or something. The NBA says, that was probably LeBron, not the NBA. That was probably LeBron probably texted him and said, get your ass off of that call right now. Because he was acting like an idiot. So
he's acting like J.R. Smith.
I think LeBron's going to keep him in check. He's been the most in check when he's been with LeBron, so I think that'll probably stay the case.
Except for the championship parade when he had his shirt off.
Well, that's a championship parade. No one gives a shit.
That and when he cost the Cavaliers a game because they forgot what the score was.
Oh my God, that was I forgot about that.
Yeah, but LeBron forgave him for that and wanted him back on his team, so I can't really get too much on him for that when LeBron forgave him. So.
All right, well, bringing the show back to what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about Phillies baseball. We're not here to talk about basketball. We're not here to talk about other sports. We're the Chase Independent. podcast, as in Chase Utley. We're talking Phillies baseball. So, there's two scenarios, obviously. If either the Phillies make the playoffs or they don't. And guys, if they don't make the playoffs, I'll start off with this one. And Borek, I'll start off with you this time. If the Phillies don't make the playoffs in this shortened 60-game season, what do you think would be the biggest culprit for why they would miss the playoffs?
100% pitching. If we miss the playoffs, it would be because Pivetta doesn't step up. Vince, who looked good in the simulated game,
Throws 97 pitches in 2 innings.
Pitch well. Well, that's why I said he should be in the bullpen. Look good in the simulated game for a bullpen role. So figure that out, Phillies, and finally do that. And then Spencer Howard, I think he can step up for this team. It depends to what degree he steps up. And you might need another young kid, honestly, depending how well Eflin or a Pivetta pitches, like maybe a Seabold or something like that, who just knows how to hit the strike zone, as has impressed in the minors and lit up the Arizona Fall League last year, at least to be a long man for you that maybe eventually plays his way into the rotation, because he actually, at least knows how to hit the strike zone, where you don't always know that with Velasquez and Pivetta deep getting past like 3 innings. So that's what I look to. If the pitching doesn't step up, that's going to be the main culprit in my eyes.
So does the bulk of your opinion lie with the starting rotation, or is it the bullpen that'll cost them more?
Our pitching just isn't that deep in general, to be quite honest with you. I mean, you got Aaron Nola, you got Zach Wheeler, you got Howard, who you need to step up. You still don't know. You're asking a rookie to really step up for you that's coming straight from Double-A. So you don't know if that's going to work or if that's not going to work. You hope it does. And same would go if you put Seabold in. He only pitched in Double-A, but pitched pretty well with Spence. So you have a lot of question marks everywhere, because Neris is your best reliever. Robertson, we don't know if he's going to come in, and Sir Anthony would have been your second best guy, but he's not pitching, and they don't know what the hell they're doing with him. So I would say both, really. We just don't have deep pitching. That's
Fair enough.
Protect and focus on again. Yeah.
Andrew, how do you feel about this? What would be the biggest culprit for you if the Phillies fail to make the playoffs?
If I was to pick one, I'd definitely say the bullpen. But just because I don't think it's that deep, and we don't know who fully is going to be in there yet until we pick our starting rotation. And a lot of the guys in the bullpen are former starters, which in a way I think does hurt the bullpen, because it's a lot of transition pieces. But to go something away from pitching, I think we all can agree the offense is going to be really good. And not necessarily one specific area in terms of the players, but an area that they kind of dealt with especially last year and a little bit the year before. And I don't know about you guys, but I am a little worried about this team's health overall. And I know that might sound like a cop-out or whatever, but I'm not trying to use it as an excuse. I'm just talking about like a worry on why this team wouldn't make the playoffs. And that's because, I mean, we look at all the injuries this team was dealt with last year. I think at one point, from multiple injuries from different guys, I think the Phillies led with the most used starting pitchers for throughout most of the season. I don't know if they ended that way, but just because, like, if you look at it, obviously we know the McCutchen injury that really hurt the team last year. We know Segura played through it, but he battled an injury for most of the year. Obviously, Gregorius, we talked about, he struggled last year when he got back from his injury, so we'll see what he does in a new spot. Jay Bruce got injured a lot last year. We all know Roman Quinn's injury history. And then you go to the pitching, we all know Tommy Hunter's injury history. We know Arrieta battled a lot of injuries this year, and everyone's excited to see what he's got when he comes back. Eflin's dealt with his fair share, and Wheeler with the Mets, he dealt with his fair share of injuries. So we all know that this team isn't that deep overall when you got to go into the farm system as well. So one of my huge concerns is the health, because I don't know what to expect in a rush kind of second camp here, and then with 60 games, the off days are very limited and stuff. So I'm really interested to see how this team can hold up health-wise, just because of what we've seen in past years.
Yeah, Andrew, that's a really good point, especially if you look at what happened last season. You had McCutchen blowing out his knee. He went on the IL. That was a huge, huge loss for them offensively. David Robertson, huge injury for the bullpen. Sir Anthony, huge injury for the bullpen. Arrieta dealt with injuries throughout the year. The starting rotation was doomed by injuries. The bullpen was doomed by injuries. Just guys getting hurt left and right. And that was a team that finished at 500 at 81-81. And honestly, I think that with those guys healthy, you can probably add 9 or 10 wins, and that would probably be a playoff team right there. So I think, injuries are certainly a big thing to look at, and they need to be able to stay healthy if they want to do well this year. Anyway, Biscuit, how do you feel about this?
I think this team in this format is going to live or die by that starting lineup. I really do think it's going to come down to the hitting. I think they need to this year could almost be like what the 2019 season philosophy was going to be with that team, which was the hitting was going to be good, and as long as the pitching remained mediocre at best, that was their window and that was their shot to get in. I think it's the same thing almost. The hitting, as we even said last year, this lineup, especially on paper, can be really good. I also, with that being said, think there are reasons that it's fair to be concerned about this lineup also, simply because, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter say, this lineup can stack up with, the Braves lineup or the Nationals lineup. And like I said, on paper, they probably could. The difference between those two teams and the Phillies is that they got it done. The Phillies did not get it done last year, and it felt like everyone was either never on the same page. There were guys who were on massive tears when everyone else was cold, and then vice versa. It felt like everyone either took a step back or really, as Andrew and you brought up, were injured. So if those things continue and, Bryce doesn't get hot until the 40th game of the season, or JT slumps for the last month and a half or something like that, if it's streaky, they're not going to make it, regardless of what the pitching is doing. The pitching's going to be the pitching at the end of the day. They got two guys at the top of the rotation who could be very dominant. And I don't know if everyone got to see Zach Wheeler today, but he looked phenomenal. And as you mentioned, Borek, Vince looked pretty good as well, too. I think the fact that we're also not starting in the end of March where the weather's still not as hot as it is now, and that these guys aren't going to have to worry about, keeping their arms warmed up as much just because it's going to be so damn hot out. I think pitchers are going to be able to hit the ground a little bit more, at a faster pace rather than, starting slow and building their arm up, even if they aren't able to get that long into games. But it really, like I said, the pitching's going to be the pitching. If this lineup starts off slow or is streaky throughout, it's going to be a bust, and you don't want that, especially, with people heading into contract years or walking after this season. You really don't, even in a full season, you don't want to miss the playoffs this year. It's not going to be a good look for the organization. You're going to leave a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. It's not going to look pretty. So this hitting needs to be superb, if not, at least good.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned there about how they weren't all 100% at the same time at any point last season. You had the opening series where Bryce and Reese were both hitting the ball well, but then Bryce went into his slump while Reese was hitting pretty well. And the second half of the season, it kind of flip-flopped. Reese was terrible in the second half, while at the same time Bryce was on a tear and pretty much carrying the team. So in order for them to succeed, they need everybody gelling at the same time, but most importantly, they need those two, the guys who are supposed to be the thunder and lightning in the lineup, to be gelling at the same time. You need Reese and Bryce to be hitting the cover off the ball, supporting each other in the lineup as opposed to one doing all the damage and the other doing nothing at all. I think that's a really, really big thing, and that's a good point that you brought up there. Moving on to, if the Phillies make the playoffs, what do you guys, and Biscuit, I'll start with you. What do you guys think will be the biggest reason for them making the playoffs?
Everything I just said, but the opposite. They have to hit like, excuse my language, they got to hit like motherfuckers now, man. They have to, and they do. They do. Look, going back to 2019, you replace 4, position players with 2 reigning National League MVPs, the best catcher in baseball. You go out and get an all-star shortstop who was known for being a very pure slap hitter who would always, didn't strike out a lot, always kept the ball in play. We need to see that pay off now. That's the bottom line. There's no more you can't, do this dance anymore with like what kind of team are the Phillies going to be. If this team wants to contend for any period of time, it needs to start right now because this, window is not open very long. You need to start maximizing its potential immediately. And that's going to start with the guys that they invested the most in really producing at the level that they're capable of. Not to say, people come out the season Bryce Harper had. I thought he had a fine year, but it's fair to expect a little bit better. He's capable of it. The same goes with Gene Segura. Gene Segura, after especially in the second half, was hard. And as we mentioned, he battled through injury. They continue to upgrade that lineup with getting Didi in the offseason. Say what you will about Gregorius, but he's had, very good success. Guy is known for getting the big hit when needed, and that is something we need as well. You put together a lineup that should be able to produce runs. It needs to just happen now. We need to see it happen. And I think once I see that happen, I could say to myself, okay, this lineup can put up with teams like the Braves or the Nationals, and they should be able to compete for a division spot. But you can't, just because the success hasn't paid off yet, you really can't sit here and say that now. So I apologize for this rant. My point is the hitters, they need a fucking hit. They got to hit. They got to hit dingers. You got to hit them in the gap. You got to get on base. You got to sign JT. All that shit's got to get done. But that's what it really comes down to.
I appreciate that rant, and I also appreciate you making the selection of tonight's show name very easy for me. Anyway, Borek, what do you think will be the biggest difference if the Phillies end up making the playoffs this year?
Yeah, I don't know. This might surprise people. Others it won't. I think it'll be. I personally think Bryce is going to do this regardless of if we make the playoffs or not. But placing top 3 in the MVP and Wheeler placing top 5 in the Cy Young, because that means Noah's going to do well. I don't think Noah's just going to suck all of a sudden. So. And who knows? If you have 2 guys place top 5 in the Cy, then you're sure as hell making the playoffs. But Wheeler, I think this is the year he's just going to take off, and it's finally going to be like Cole did. I'm not saying to the degree of Garrett Cole, but how he took off around age 29, 30. I think Wheeler's going to be able to do similar, and we'll see if it gets to that degree. But even if it's 85 to 90% of that degree, he still has a chance to be top 5, and that's going to be helping to lead to anchor the staff and have 2 guys there rather than 1. And then you're going to have Harper that's just leading your lineup and always keeping everybody pumped up because he's a high energy guy. And you saw how that Nationals lineup banked on him in his MVP year. Everybody ran off of his energy. So that would be kind of what
they banked on him so much that they won a World Series without him.
No, I meant the year with the MVP. The year he won the MVP, they couldn't have done shit without him.
Different Nationals team, though, yeah. But, as far as Wheeler goes, I think 80 and 90% isn't enough. I think you need him at 100 to be able to.
No, I said 80 to 90. I said 85 to 90% of Garrett Cole.
Okay, yeah, that
not
makes
of
more
him,
sense,
not
man.
of himself. Yeah. If he can't be 85 to 90% of himself. If he's 85 to 90% of Garrett Cole, though, that's probably even top 5 in the Cy Young because that's still like a 2-something ERA.
As I say, 85 to 90% of himself is like a 5.5 ERA.
No, no, definitely not of himself.
Anyway, Andrew, what's your difference maker for this Phillies team if they make the playoffs this year?
I'm gonna repeat a little what Borek said right there, and I have 3 guys that I think are really gonna have to be the guys to make the difference. And first, I'll say Zach Wheeler because you bring him in as an off-season acquisition. And the reason why I say that is because last year, obviously, Aaron Nola struggled at different times, but we know Aaron Nola will be fine in the long term. We know he'll be the ace of this rotation. Then you look at, You look at the guys after that last year. Your next leader in quality starts was 14 by Zach Eflin out of 28 starts he had. So that's only 58. That's only 50% of his starts as a quote two starter, if you want to put him in that category, because that were quality starts. And as a whole, the Phillies were 15th in quality starts at 58 behind, and 13 and 14. I'll just say were Miami and Kansas City. Obviously, two really bad teams. Even though the Phillies probably gave Miami half their quality starts. But the leaders were up. The high contenders in the league were 89, 87, 83, 81, and 80. That's the top five. So if you want to get in that ballpark, I think a lot of it's going to come on Zach Wheeler's hands. I mean, obviously, again, you know what you're going to get in Nola, so I think Wheeler needs to come in and hopefully he can be what he was supposed to be. Obviously, it'd take a lot for him to be as big of a prospect as he was with the Mets. So hopefully he can just get to something close to that at least, where he can give you more than a 50% quality start rate. So he'd be my starting pitcher acquisition. I think in terms of the offense, a lot of it's going to rely on Rhys Hoskins. We all know the second half decline he had, and you guys mentioned earlier about how he was never on the same pace as Harper. And if you can get him going with Harper and JT throughout the entire season, it really make that offense so much better because, I mean, when Hoskins is struggling, especially when he was hitting behind Harper, like that's a reason for the other team to kind of pitch around Harper, not give him what he wants. That way they can, if they let him walk or whatever, he gets the first, and then they just attack Hoskins and it gets him out of the inning or gets him out of a good situation. So I think when it comes to the offense, a lot of it's going to really rely on Rhys Hoskins to be a really big power hitter in that middle of the lineup where he can be a big enough threat where other teams have to face everybody before and behind him. I don't know whether way Girardi's going to put the lineup, so I think Hoskins has to be the guy hitting wise. And then out of the bullpen, obviously, I'm a big fan of him, more of a setup man, but obviously he's been the closer for a little bit. But a lot of it's going to rely on Hector Neris. I mean, he's going to be turned to a lot this year. As I know Kapler never really mentioned who the actual closer would be, but I have a feeling obviously Girardi won't be like that. So his 2.93 ERA last year wasn't bad overall, obviously, but as a lockdown closer, I think he's got to bring that down a little bit and give you a little more than 28 saves. So those would be my three keys to the season in terms of players to step up and get to the playoffs.
Wasn't he 28 for 34 too, or something like that? If I remember correctly, he had a few blown saves.
Yeah, I think he blew 6 or 7 saves.
Yeah, so
right.
You can't do that in a 60-game stretch either.
Oh God.
Yeah, you definitely can't blow that many in a 60-game stretch. That's missing the playoffs right there.
Yeah, so I think that kind of goes without saying, but the biggest one for me is the man who's making the most money on the whole team and some of the best money in all of baseball, and that is number 3, Bryce Harper, the guy who got us so excited for last season, had a little bit of a dud of a first half, played excellent baseball in the second half. They need him to be the 2019 second half Bryce Harper. They need him to be that throughout the entirety of this 60-game season. Yes, having Rhys performing at the height of his capability would help a lot. JT doing his thing would help a lot. Kingery, all those other guys, Didi, Segura, all those guys performing would help a lot. But Bryce is the cog in the middle of that lineup. He is what makes the lineup go. And when he's playing well, that offense could be one of the best offenses in all of baseball. So they need him to be hitting the cover off the baseball. They need him to be earning every single cent of that paycheck. It's for a 60-game season instead of 162. So asking a little bit less of him, he's getting to take 102 games off this year. They need him to be that guy and go out there and just dominate every single game, every single plate appearance. If he can do that, if he can go out there and play similar to that level that he was when he won the MVP down in DC, or similar to the level that he played at the end of last season, they're going to be tough to beat. I'm not going to say that they're going to be World Series contenders. I'm not even going to say that they're going to be favorites to win the division, but you're talking probably at least a wild card team if Bryce is hitting the ball well. So that is my biggest X factor if the Phillies do end up making the playoffs. One thing we won't see out of Bryce, though, is those fun little interactions that he had with the fans out in right field, because unfortunately we're not going to have anybody in the stands at Citizens Bank Park or any ballpark in all of baseball for that matter during this 2020 abbreviated season. However, teams have decided some of them are going to try to pump in crowd noise. And what they're going to do is they're actually taking sound bites from the video game MLB The Show, which we talked about on a few episodes here. And they're going to, I guess, play that music or play that crowd noise and amplify it based on the situation. You know, it'll be louder when the home team hits a home run. There will be some booing in there. They're going to try to make it as situational as possible. Guys, and Andrew, I'll start with you this time. What do you think about the concept of pumping in crowd noise for these attendance-less games?
I like the idea of them trying to be creative, and I really like and think it'd be funny for the fatheads or whatever you want to call them of different fans in the crowd. But as far as the actual noise, I'm kind of concerned about how well it's actually going to sound. I'm not a huge fan of it, just because I don't know. I think it's going to sound a little weird, in the sense of it's going to just seem like forced, and I don't know if the video game crowd is the best thing from the show in terms of putting it throughout an entire stadium. And I think you can do really good with some of the other stuff and implement just like music or something after a play, or obviously just whatever the team usually does on big plays that you're still going to be able to hear on TV. Like today in the inter-squad game, Kingery hit a home run, and they were able to they still did the Harry Callis out of here call. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I think just watching this game, I didn't mind the no implemented crowd noise. So I'm not the biggest fan of it, and I think I could do without it. But I guess I got to give him credit for trying to be creative and trying to think of something, because in these times you obviously have to try to think outside the box and see what else you can do.
Yeah, going back to the original thing that you said about people having pictures of themselves in the crowd, I don't know. I know a couple of you saw my post on Twitter, but Phillies, if you're listening, I am absolutely imploring you, put Chase Utley and Mac from Always Sunny right next to each other, right behind home plate. It's just the way it should be done. They both deserve it for each other. They both deserve to be having their best friend moment, just taking in a baseball game right there in the Diamond Club behind home plate. It would be perfect. So Phillies, you should be listening to this podcast, and if you are, please make that happen. That would be really awesome. Anyway, Biscuit, how do you feel about the crowd noise?
I'm pretty much in the same boat as Andrew. I get it. You know, watching the game today, listening to the broadcast, the big thing that just stood out to me was like, man, it is just so empty there. It almost looks like a completely different stadium. Like, I don't know about you, Andrew, but I felt like I wasn't even recognizing a place I've been like hundreds of times. You know, I've sat all over that ballpark and just like seeing it on TV with nothing but the lights up and baseball happening. It was just an eerie feeling for me. So I get it, man. Like, you got to try some different things, you know, not only make it enjoyable for fans to watch on TV, but I'm sure for players, you know, at the stadium, you want to make it as much of a engaging and lively atmosphere as you possibly can to replicate what it would traditionally be like. The sound noise, it's one of those things I'm indifferent about. I was fine really watching today after I got over how, you know, odd the park looked with it just being so empty. It wasn't something that really stood out to me like, man, it's just too quiet. I think the broadcast really helped. Obviously, you know, they were hardly like calling the game at points of time. It was a pretty uninteresting listen, but I'm indifferent about it. I think it's whatever. I think what'll be more exciting is trying to find ways to make that ballpark look a little more full. So that's really what I'm more interested in.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well put right there, and that, you know, it's a different experience watching it as a completely empty stadium. You know, granted, over the past few years, over the process years, we have seen some fairly empty ballparks, but we've never seen it completely empty. In fact, the only time that there's been a completely empty stadium in baseball over the past few years is that one down in Baltimore when they were protesting the police killing of Freddie Gray down there, and they decided to close off the Orioles versus White Sox game. They played in an empty stadium down there. And I just remember watching highlights of that, and I was thinking, like, okay, I know the Orioles' attendance is usually shit, and there's usually like 90% empty seats anyway, but this is just weird watching highlights of a game with nobody whatsoever in the stands. So that's going to be something that'll take some getting used to, I think, for a lot of us fans. Borek, how do you feel about the pumping in of the crowd noise at Citizens Bank and at ballparks throughout baseball?
Yeah, I'm kind of where everybody's at. I mean, if they do it, I don't mind it. I mean, I'm not going to complain about it. I don't really care that much. But I just think it's a little odd because I don't even know the highlight I retweeted. I couldn't tell if when Kalinick hit that bomb, that was a simulated game or that was just him taking BP, because they had the crowd noise with that, where on the video when Jared Kalinick hit the ball, you heard was like, oh, yeah. And I'm just like, that's kind of odd. Like, the dude literally just hit a batting practice home run, and I'm just like hearing all these people acting like the dude like won the game for them. So it's a little bit odd, especially because, like Andrew said, at MLB, I'd probably try to get old crowd noises of actual ballparks in the video game, because the video game crowd noises tend to kind of be odd at times and not match what's actually going on. So obviously you would have to grab the right crowd noises from the games, because sometimes in video games crowd noises are pretty whack. Let's just put it that way. Like,
to say the least.
Yeah. So it's not the best idea to use video game crowd noises compared to just trying to get old stuff from the stadium that doesn't involve people cursing, obviously, but just old chants and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's those video game crowds are certainly pretty inaccurate at times, so that would be weird. By the way, whack, I don't know how Shane feels about that. You know, he's kind of a grandpa when it comes to the vocabulary, so he might hit you with a violation for that one, but
are we still doing the violations anymore?
Yeah, it's been a while since someone had one.
Honestly, yeah,
I'm
it's
sure,
been a minute. We might have to go back to it, though.
Yeah, oh God, yeah, I'm sure I broke the rules 1,000 times over the last,
I'm sure we all did over the last, because nobody's been doing that shit for the last month. Well, it's been months, actually.
Borek, I think you still owe us one from all the way back in March or something like that. So I'm pretty sure we put a kibosh on that, but we might have to open it back up at some point.
I feel like it was always me or Borek. Like, either someone always had a story one night, and it was either Borek or myself, because I remember telling 3 or 4 stories.
I remember the last one that you told was probably the saddest one of all.
Yes.
See, I have a very dark sense of humor, and so do a few of my other friends. And to them, they think it's hysterical. The thought of 10-year-old me running home from the birthday party in tears because someone told me that my dad slipped on a hoagie. It's funny to kind of think about that. It got me so emotional. But in hindsight, telling people off the cuff that story, yeah, it sounds sad. It sounds like it's something that could traumatize me.
Well, if anything, it was memorable. So there's that at least.
Right on.
But getting back to what we were talking about, I'm with you guys. I'm not a fan of the pumping of the crowd noise. My biggest thing is, here's an opportunity to have the fans kind of get to know the players on a more personal level by, hearing what they're yelling to each other and what they're saying to each other and what they're cursing at the umpires throughout the course of the game. With the crowd noise and a lot of commentary going on in normal baseball games, you don't really get to hear that. Here's a great opportunity for Major League Baseball to mic up the players and replace the crowd noise with the chit-chat that's happening on the field. I think that would be really cool. And baseball, at least in comparison to other sports, hasn't really done the mic'd up thing a whole lot. I know they did it at the All-Star game, and it was kind of a weird situation there. But I think that it would be really cool just to, if a player disagrees with an umpire's strike zone, you get to hear what they're saying to them. Or if there's a conference on the mound and the pitcher and the catcher aren't on the same page, you can hear what's going on there. All kinds of different things that us fans haven't experienced before that we have a chance to experience here. And that's why I think that they need to go with the mic'd up players over the crowd noise. And plus, baseball purists like myself, we love hearing the pop of the mitt. We love hearing the crack of the bat. We love hearing, the jibes that are coming from the dugout, towards the batter and towards the pitcher. I think it would actually enhance the experience of watching the baseball game by, instead of having crowd noise, you just get to hear what the players are doing out there. I think that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sorry, Andrew. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I agree with you, Rob. My only problem is that's you're playing with fire when you do that in Boston, Philly, New York, and all these cities that are so hung-ho on everything. If you hear a disconnect and you think that disconnect's stupid, everybody and their grandson in town's going to be like, oh, well, such and such needs to get in line with blah, 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 blah. He's such an idiot. Why can't he get in line with his catcher? Like, you're definitely going to see fans like us, the Yankees fans, the Red Sox fans, probably bitching more on Twitter, potentially because of mic'd up games. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse. I definitely would love to watch it on TV. I wouldn't love to see after a loss because of hearing miscommunication on television, people making that a million times more than what it has to be. But
I mean, my point to that though would be you kind of see that already without the mic'd up. Like if
that's why I think it'll be worse.
But like if the catcher gets crossed up by the pitcher, like you can tell when that happens. If whatever outfielder misses the relay guy, you can tell when that happens. You can tell when the miscommunication happens either way. With every replay and then the expansion of the camera view, like if a guy should have thrown the ball home, but the guy cuts it off anyway, you can tell when the miscommunication happens. So I don't think that would play too much of a factor in there because you kind of already see that all of that backlash already.
I get that, but I thought Rob was saying from the perspective of when you go to the mound. I'm not sure if you were saying this, Rob, but you would hear the mound visit.
Yeah, I mean, you see when the guys go to the mound, the pitcher has his mouth covered with his glove, and the catcher's out there, he's obscured from everything too, so you can't really do any lip reading there.
I was more saying though, if you're hearing the mound visit, which I wouldn't mind this as a player. I'd be a player that would be fine with my catcher doing this to get me into it. But people probably wouldn't. Some people might get on you on TV if you're sucking that day. All of a sudden, your catcher comes out and goes, "What the hell are you doing? Like, what is this shit that you're doing today?" And then just starts like yelling at you because that's the way you get motivated. That's not going to look the best mic'd up. It might be funny, but it's not going to look the best for both sides since everybody gets motivated differently. That's why it would be hilarious. It would just make Twitter even more of a frenzy. So,
and Twitter's already a giant fucking shithole. So I don't think you can possibly get any worse than what Twitter already is. I think the only thing is you would probably need to, you're going to have players going back to the clubhouse and stuff like that. And you would probably need to mute the TVs in there so that, opposing players can't catch on to what teams are doing during their mound visits and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that would be the biggest scare with already the cheating that's like kind of happening. So I don't know how they'd work that out. But no, Rob, I agree with you completely though. Like you see it in, like the All-Star game and even the spring training. I think they've done a couple games where they mic up a guy, and I mean all the fans talk about how much they love it. But I don't know why the MLB never sees that and changes their way of things. But I think it already gets positive feedback when that happens. I remember a spring training game. I think it was. I forget what year it was, but it was with Mookie Betts while he was with the Red Sox, and he was kind of mic'd up for the game, and everyone thought he was pretty funny. The only thing I think they'd have to be careful. I don't know if you guys would want it, but the one thing I would not be in favor of is when they do the mid-game interviews. I would just wait till after, like leave the interviews for before and after the game. I'm kind of not a fan of that when they kind of drop down and do the
in the dugout or like while the guy's fielding. You mean?
Both. I'm honestly not a big fan of either of them.
Okay, no, I was just curious.
The social distancing protocols that are coming into play here, I don't know if interviews will even happen.
Well, I think you meant interviews from the announcer's booth down through.
Yeah, I meant like when they talk to the guys during.
I know what you're talking about.
But I've never been a big fan of those. Like even even NBA, like when they do it after the third quarter or whatever, and they bring the coach in, or in the World Series when they interview the manager after the fourth inning or whatever. I've never been a big fan of that, but I love the in-game mic'd up stuff. Like when you see in football, especially, I think it's when it really works well. But like when you see the guys going in before the huddle or before games, kind of hyping each other up, I think that just adds so much to the game. And like you said, Rob, like this is what fans need, and this is a time for them to see it. And obviously, it's completely different with the way they read signs. But it's funny when you see like college or even like the Little League World Series when they put the mic on players and coaches and stuff. And even when the coaches go out there in the College World Series or the Little League World Series, and you see whatever dad talking to the Little League pitcher, and you can hear the whole conversation like from there. So if they're doing it in those, I don't know why they couldn't do it in the major leagues.
Yeah, I think it also takes an extra earpiece, if I'm not mistaken, and a thing to attach if you're going to do interviews during the game too. Because to be mic'd up, all you have to do is have the output device. You would have to also have an input device, obviously, which would be annoying to play with in a non-All-Star game setting. So I agree with Andrew. I don't want in-game interviews.
Yeah, and I don't think they would do that given the fact that these regular season games actually have meaning, whereas where they did do it in the All-Star game doesn't mean anything. It no longer decides home field. So it's kind of just, an exhibition game where the guys can go out there and they can talk to the broadcasters and, just kind of shoot the shit without worrying about what's going on in the field too much. But these games do have meaning. So I think with that being considered, they would stray away from doing in-game interviews. All right, so do you guys, Biscuit, I know you said that you have something. Andrew and Borek, do you guys have any final thoughts that you throw in before we get to what I think is going to be a pretty interesting final thought from Biscuit?
Nothing too groundbreaking, Rob. Nothing that has not been brought up by either myself or other fellow members of the Chasing Independent podcast.
All right. Well, still looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'd just say my final thought is 10 days till opening day. I can't wait for next Friday to come here. And I did read, I don't know if you guys saw this, but every single inter-squad game from here to the start of the season will be either on MLB TV or streamed on the Phillies Twitter. So that will be fun and fun to keep up with and just see different types of those guys throughout the next week or so before we actually get into real games.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. Borek, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Andrew on that. All that's going to be fun to watch. I know I've been paying attention to all the different things I record through MLB. That's how I saw, and then went on Twitter and retweeted that bomb by Jarred Kelenic, who I'm very happy is not on the Mets. Thank you for making that terrible trade, Mets. So
very happy too.
We really appreciate that. Because Edwin Diaz, if he keeps sucking, that looks even worse. So thank you again, Mets. So that's one of the closing thoughts. The other would be, like I said, I think our pitching needs to step up this year, but I think Wheeler was going to have a great year. I think Nola was going to have a very good year, but I think Wheeler might actually outmatch Nola because I think this is the year he's going to take off, where Nola's going to pitch like a normal Aaron Nola. So if Wheeler takes off, I think that's why he'll be top 5 potentially in the Cy Young. I don't want to say he's going to win the Cy Young, but he could be top 5 in the Cy Young.
You are really putting a lot of hype on Zach Wheeler there. I like the guy. I think he's going to be an improvement, but he's not Aaron Nola's level.
He is Aaron Nola's level with his stuff. He just hasn't pitched to his level. He pitched right there with DeGrom when he won the damn Cy Young in 2018 in the second half of the season. DeGrom had one of the most historic seasons, and when you look at their numbers, I remember a Mets reporter tweeting this back then. He was right there with them for that extended clip. And then, obviously, he wasn't there in the first half, but he just has great second halves, and T-Mac talked about that in the broadcast. You're starting in July. I think this benefits Wheeler the most. You're literally starting in the heat of the season, and that's when he normally pitches to like a low 2 ZRA anyway. So it wouldn't be unheard of for him to pitch to a low 2 ZRA for the whole season.
Yeah, pitching in one of the best pitchers parks in all of baseball, though. And, yeah, he had, a good second half of that season, but throughout the course of his career, he's been pretty mediocre considering where he's pitching. So forgive me for being skeptical, but I'm not sold on the guy. Whereas Aaron Nola's put off put up great numbers pitching in a relatively good hitter's park. So they're, for me, on two different levels.
Yeah, well, I think you'll see differently after that. I think we'll see no one on the same level. I just think we'll see them both on the same level after this.
Borek is all in on Zach Wheeler, and you know what?
Hey.
I admire it, dude. I agree with you. I think he has potential to really come out of the woodwork and surprise people. I think he was always kind of, when you're in a rotation with, a back-to-back Cy Young Award winner in 2018 and 2019, Jacob deGrom, you have Syndergaard in that rotation. Like, you're going to be kind of you're not going to be the face of that rotation. And now the guy's in a position where he's like considered a 1-2 punch. He really is one of the top dogs. And as Borek mentioned, the guy is filthy in second halves. And the fact that we're starting right in the heat of the summer, I agree with you, Borek. I think it's going to pay dividends, and I think he's going to be pretty good heading down the stretch.
I hope you guys are both right. I'm not sold on it. Borek, I'm even willing to make a bet with you that Nola's going to be better.
I don't think he will be 60 because he's inconsistent early, usually. I think a 60 actually hurts Aaron. But
we will see about that. I hope you're wrong on that account.
I don't
you're
think
right
it
about
goes
Wheeler.
to more than a 3.2 ERA. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think he'll have a low 2. I don't think he'll have a Cy Young season because of inconsistencies in the first 60 games. So.
Oh, well, we will see about that. Biscuit, you mentioned something. You seemed pretty eager to have a final thought before we started recording here. So what is that final thought that you were excited to get out there?
So I used this as my final thought on the show that I did the other day with Borek. I have made the decision on behalf of myself and the entire Chasing the Pennant community to make this my final thought for every single show I'm on until this no longer needs to be a final thought. And that is sign Jacob Tyler Romuto to at least a 5-year extension.
Yes.
It is going to be said now on every show that I'm on as my final thought. I'm going to bring up any updates or news or rumors that there are on what is happening with this contract extension. And who knows, if it goes on forever, I might start talking about it in different mediums. I might make a poem about it. I might write a little song, play a little folk Scandinavian song on a little ukulele or something like that. Whatever it takes. The fans are now clamoring for this to get done. You're seeing people flock in hordes to the ballpark and screaming over the fence. It was like 4 kids, but they wanted JT. You see people writing it out on pizza boxes. You see trucks driving around with it on it. Get it done. Next thing you know, you're going to see billboards. It's time. Pony up. I don't really know what the holdup is at this point. I'm still optimistic it will get done, but until it's done, I will never stop talking about it. So JT, if you're listening, I love you, man. I'm rooting for you. Clentac & Co., get it done.
You know what? I think we'll get that done. Remember you telling us about that chant that you and your friends did for Placido Polanco when he stepped up to the plate? I think you need to get back together with your friends, and you need to make up a similar chant for JT Realmuto every time he steps to the plate. I don't know how it would work, what it would sound like, but I think that would be enough to get the job done. Do it loud enough that Matt Clentac, wherever he's at, will be able to hear you, or take video and post on Twitter or something like that. Get his attention.
Trending.
Get yourself trending. Oh, man. Gosh. Anyway, my final thought is we have a very good band that is responsible for our intro and outro music. They're called the Jackdaws. You can find them at www.thejackdaws.com. They have a Patreon account. You can find that at patreon.com/thejackdaws. You can listen to their music on any streaming service. Celtic rock, excellent music. I love it. You'll love it too if you listen to it. Definitely give them a follow, subscribe to their Patreon account if you're so inclined to do so. Check out their website. They've got lots of great merchandise. They're awesome, and they deserve your support, and especially during a time like this where it's hard to get live performances because of everywhere being shut down. they're relying a lot on the Patreon. They're relying a lot on selling merchandise. So definitely check them out. Really, really good music. Also want to give a shout out to Just Food. You can reach them by phone at 215-794-3663. That's 215-794-FOOD. They're located in Buckingham Green, Buckingham, Pennsylvania, right off of York Road. Their owner, Rob, a really great friend of the Chase Independent podcast. If you go in, tell him that Chase Independent sent you. He's a great guy. Great selection of food there. You will not be disappointed. Once again, that's Just Food, located in Buckingham Green, off of York Road. That is 215-794-3663. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Chase Independent podcast, and we'll be back with another one in just a few short days.
Man, I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such eagle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.